Hey, everybody. This is your host, Nevin Gussack at New Ideas, used to be the Politically Homeless podcast. With me is one of the many friends of the show. He is a columnist and researcher, Juan David Rojas. He has written for Compact Magazine, American Affairs, as well as other journals. And he's also a national security and foreign policy consultant for a number of years. And we're going to be talking about the state of MAGA as well as National Conservatism, organizations like Compact Magazine, American Affairs, the National Conservatism Conference, American Compass, and others. Welcome back, Juan. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me back on, Nevin. I'm doing good.
Good. My pleasure. Well, MAGA these days, it seems like the shootout at the OK Corral. We have the Iran-Israel war that's brewing, where there's already severe damage, loss of life on both sides. That is fracturing the quote-unquote America First or MAGA movement. We have trade issues where Trump is going back and forth, including on issues like allowing 500,000 Chinese nationals into the United States. His backtracking on enforcement with ICE.
Yeah, that's crazy. I believe when I saw that.
Under powerful donors, that a so-called the BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill.
Oh, yeah, that's another nightmare.
So, Juan, we got a lot to talk about. So, Juan, what were your hopes? I know you were kind of sour on Trump, like I was. Both of us very sour. After his first term. As many of you know in the audience, I supported Trump in 2016. Of course, I had concerns and reservations, which I had published in the past. But I voted for him in the Republican primary in the general election in 2016. Thought Trump was really the better of all of the evils, so to speak, in the Republican Party and Hillary Clinton for many reasons. Juan, what did you hope for? I did not vote for Trump in his second term, by the way. I did not. But you and I had some lingering hopes here and there that maybe on issues like trade and possibly some other issues, he would move forward. I was happy with his Iron Dome over America, which was anti-missile defense, which is certainly not aggressive, it's defensive. You and I agree that we should keep the preemptive wars that America would undertake at a minimum, a real minimum. So I think you and I would agree with that. What were your hopes for Trump too, even though you were kind of suspicious and had a lot of concerns about his policies?
Well, the funny thing is that in a way, my trajectory with Trump is somewhat inverse to yours. I've never voted for him, and 2 out of the 3 times I voted against him. But ironically, this last time around, I abstained. I conscientiously objected to the vote for the president. I did not vote. I voted for the other positions, but just left the presidential race blank. And I guess like I said, I've never liked him, but I guess like some other people, I figured, he really wasn't that bad in the first term. If anything, we were better off objectively. I'm not going to deny that. And maybe I don't like this guy. He's I can think of a lot of 4-letter words to describe him, but everything should be fine. Yeah, the system held up, and there were some actual good things that he did. He's unorthodox for certain things. And, maybe some of the so-called populists and his coalition, we could see some progress, maybe bipartisan even, good things and antitrust and whatnot, and trade and protectionism. And unfortunately, wow, I was dead wrong. I defended him to a degree in the sense that, I said, it shouldn't be too bad. Look, they have a 2-seat majority in the House of Representatives, and not a big majority in the Senate either. If anything, just business as usual and we should be okay. But wow, like they've just been pushing the limits on everything with executive power. Frankly, so much that they've done is unconstitutional, clearly has and will continue to be rolled back by the courts, which I've been glad to see. It's it's terrible. Doge was a fraud, and what the little that they did do was terrible, in my opinion, for the most part. Sure, maybe they found some like things that we shouldn't have been funding, but obviously they didn't really make a dent in the cutting the budget. And in Trump's own words is basically a fraud. And that's the other sad part. They genuinely thought that they would be able to cut $1 trillion from the budget. It's insane. I mean, it's really hilarious. Sagar Enjeti, he was saying that he was talking to someone in the administration early on who told him, like, yeah, Sagar, it's just that for the first time ever, we really are going to have an administration that's committed to cutting spending. It's like, are you kidding me? This is what Republicans have been doing for decades. Yeah, they just never actually make a difference because anyway. But the most disappointing thing for me has been the protectionist agenda, which has just been a disaster. Yeah. Frankly, during the campaign, I actually was okay with what he was proposing at the time, like a universal 10% tariff and then 20% on China or 30%. He kind of it gives different figures sometimes, but the global, the across the board tariff of 10%, I thought, what, the effect shouldn't be too terrible in terms of inflation. But wow, I mean, this Liberation Day stuff and then the back and forth that they're on and they're off, it's frozen investment, frozen hiring. Like, I mean, there's really no positive way to sell this, in my opinion. I guess it's somewhat surprising that inflation hasn't gone up. The latest CPI report said that if anything, it ticked down a little bit, but that's because the economy is slowing. So, which has been aggravated by the tariffs. So all of this is completely counterproductive. Our trade deficit has actually increased. And really what we've seen is that all of the quote unquote promising figures within the Republican coalition, both within and outside of the government, have little to no power, or are completely spineless and are just not willing to use any political capital that they may or may not have. We can name names, but it's sad. Yeah, most of them just want to maintain their good standing with the boss, with MAGA in general. And I guess the only exception to that now is with this conflict between Israel and Iran. That and I've been glad to see that. I am a restrainer. I'm very non-interventionist. I think that basically all of the wars we've involved ourselves in since after World War II have been pointless and counterproductive. So I've been glad to see, the Tucker Carlsons and some of these other people pushing back, saying we cannot get involved in this. This is not our war. And frankly, what Israel has done has put us in a very precarious position. I was for the negotiations with Iran. So, yeah, I guess I can end it there for now.
No, I mean, that's a good summary, of some of your hopes and your disappointment. With Trump, I voted for him in the Republican primary in 2016 and voted for him in the general in 2016. I did not vote for him in 2020 or 2024. I was very disappointed with COVID, with his performance on COVID. I wrote about that on my Substack for those listeners who want to check out my Substack article, Useful Idiots on the Right series, where I discuss Trump's COVID policies. It was in many respects very disappointing and distressing, to say the least. I was very concerned that Trump brought Elon Musk aboard. I had some small rays of optimism or hints of optimism in the sense that maybe Doge would find waste, because I definitely agree with more efficient government
Yeah, who doesn't?
from a good government perspective. I definitely do. But the way it was done was wrong. I look, as you know, I manage a small library down here in Broward County, Florida. What you need to do as a leader, I'm not saying I'm the best leader necessarily, but what you do as a decent leader is you got to consult with your best people, your all the stakeholders in an organization to see how are we going to make efficiencies. You at least have to make an effort rather than create an atmosphere of fear and authoritarianism. My other concerns with Musk was his ties with Russia and China. There's a national security issue with that. I am on the foreign policy issue, I'm in the middle of between you and a neoconservative. I lie somewhere in the middle. So just for the audience, in case you're not familiar with, I used to be a neoconservative many years ago, but I've outgrown that for a few different reasons here and there, both largely practical and some humanitarian. But I'm not a complete isolationist or complete restrained person. I believe in a strong national defense, as everybody knows, and backing our allies to a certain point too as well.
For instance, I forgot to say that I actually disagree with the Golden Dome, which, I mean, I guess to be fair, I guess it wouldn't hurt to have, but Trump's so-called Golden Dome. But I don't really see, I think we can do fine without it. I mean, we have two big, beautiful oceans. Realistically, would you not run the risk of being invaded? I guess you could argue that that could be a possibility in the future. But I mean, and talk about, like austerity, I think it's unnecessary spending, in my opinion.
Yeah, with the austerity, we could do a whole show on that. So I was concerned when I saw Elon Musk, or actually the Doge X account, saying that they were looking to recruit high IQ small government revolutionaries. Look, my eyes are trained to see buzzwords, and the buzzwords for that, in my opinion, is basically plutocracy or oligarchy, privatized oligarchy with democratic trappings. Musk and Trump were joking about and laughing about how they busted unions in their workplaces, particularly in Musk's Tesla. And here was a presidential candidate, an ex-president that was representing himself, as a candidate of the working class, while Kamala Harris was this out-of-touch anti-working class, anti-middle class California liberal. So I had a lot of concerns about that. I had concerns about Project 2025. I've looked at the actual document, which I have on my computer, and there are aspects of the defense program that I definitely agree with, although I was deeply disturbed that it really didn't have anything, if to the best of my recollection, on keeping the private defense contractors accountable and prevent massive overcharging and their corrupt lobbying schemes of the revolving door between the military and private defense contractors.
None of which Doge touched, which they even, flirted. Musk at one point said that, yeah, we'll look into that, and they never did. I mean, that's really where you would find the so-called waste, fraud, and abuse. Actually, it's hilarious. They didn't actually find any fraud. If anything, it's either a huge indictment to Doge's efforts, or suggests that the government is pretty unfraudulent, which, from a small government libertarian perspective, is heresy.
Well, the real issue, I think, Juan, is that people like Elon Musk and the Project 2025 crew, other than a few organizations and people that were on there, I think I don't know if Julius Klein was there or not. American Compass was, I think there might have been one or maybe a few others that were pretty solid, but every organization.
Project 2025, I know that J.D. Vance wrote like the forward for it or something like that. To my knowledge, I don't think, maybe American Compass was involved, but
they were listed as on the organizations that were involved in the process. So you had a few people, Coalition for a Prosperous America, which is a transpartisan anti-free trade group. I believe they were involved, Peter Navarro. There were a few people who are protectionists or,
Not necessarily of the good kind.
Yeah, I mean, I have my questions now about Peter Navarro, but putting that aside, I was very concerned. They're all against the New Deal. That's really what it comes down to. They're ideologically opposed to the New Deal because they have in my opinion, they have their own vision of what American society should be. There is the issues of the tech billionaires under the influence of Curtis Yarvin, who is just, and I don't want to sound unprofessional, but I'm going to unload. He is I really am sorry, guys, but he is a butt ugly human being who is bright, but is butt ugly on the inside and the outside, who wants to, in his own writings, create feudal fiefdoms that breaking apart the United States, and admires authoritarian enemies of the United States and would cede whole regions to Russian and Chinese influence in these spheres of influence. I mean, he is just awful. And he has a lot of influence by libertarians like Hans Hoppe and Ludwig von Mises, although I prefer von Mises comparatively versus Hoppe. But putting that aside, you have a lot of these bad influences in the Trump administration. Sure, you had JD.
You're real far referring to Yarvin telling rich people what they want to hear.
Exactly. Well, and basically, I mean, it's interesting. His parents were communists, or it might have been his grandparents were communists.
Hey, I don't know. Well, no, you might be correct. I don't know his background that well, but I do know that his parents were like government workers.
Yes, they are. They were federal workers, if I recall correctly. And he started as a libertarian, and eventually he moved away from libertarianism. But in reality, he is for this sort of privatized oligarchy. You saw that movie, what is it, 2073, which recently came out? You see the sci-fi series Incorporated that was on many years ago. That's Yarvin's society. It's a privatized authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had hopes for certain elements of the MAGA movement, J.D. Vance, in the sense that he was more for a pro-worker populism that was still
I liked them too before.
I mean, he was in love basically with Lena Khan, who was Joe Biden's FTC chair. So
a huge disappointment. The only one who's actually who's actually like using his political capital and fighting the good fight, in my opinion, is Hawley. Probably because he's still in the Senate. So
Hawley is good. He at least is making noises about the economic issues. And that's definitely a good thing. So when I look at his administration, I mean, from my point of view, our foreign policy views somewhat differ. I mean, I take a more not that you're a friend of Russia or China or you have any illusions. Let me make that clear to the audience. But, I have concerns about like Tulsi Gabbard or opinions on the Russians, China.
I actually have the opposite perspective on
I figured as much.
Gabbard, that she's just been another disappointment. You'd think that someone like her would be, a good voice of reason with regard to the conflict now between Israel and Iran. But actually, who knows? Because on the Middle East, she's always been very hawkish against like Islamism. So like on paper, she's said that I don't know, because she didn't want to topple Assad, but who knows how she really feels about Iran. I don't know, but she's just kind of, like I said, she's another one of these shills that it's just whatever the boss tells her she has to go with. I will say though, and I'll give you credit here, Nevin. I was one of the, and I give Trump a lot of credit for for pushing for negotiations and trying to find a peaceful solution between Ukraine and Russia. But unfortunately, the truth is, it really does seem like the Russians are not interested in peace, and they figured that they can just get more out of continuing the war. And yeah, I'll admit that yeah, my hopes there have been scuttled, to your credit, because you've always said that, you know, Russia can't be trusted or whatever.
Yeah. And the thing is I look at, and we can, you know, with Iran, and then we'll go back into domestic and other foreign policies, because the elephant in the room is Iran. And for those of the listeners, I'm sure you're all familiar with the fact that the Iran-Israel war that's currently brewing, and let's pray for the civilians on both sides of the camp. For those of you, let's have prayers. My position is look, the Iran deal, and I could read some stuff from my Useful Idiots on the Right essay on the positives and negatives of Trump's first term. You know, I did not agree with the JCPOA because Iran was still secretly building nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons research behind the scenes as intelligence that has leaked, even admissions by their own officials. But like Ukraine, like anywhere in the Middle East or anywhere in the world for that matter, I think we have to be very mindful about if we decide to commit boots on the ground, because what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq, what happened in other conflicts. And for me, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the President of the United States, and I have to think about putting other people that I don't know, their family members, their sons, their daughters, their fathers, their uncles, their brothers, their sisters, their lives on the line. That's a very serious thing that, frankly, is one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to have the job in politics. I'm serious. I'm joking, but I'm not. So we have to, that's why I like to navigate a fine line. You can not trust a country's government, Iran, and that's fine. But you also have to be very, very, very careful with, if we're going to go into a country and back an ally like Israel and go in and overthrow Iran, we have to have a better plan than we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because that was a colossal failure. And what happened? Iranian influence crept into Iraq by the time we withdrew.
Yeah, or look at Syria. Now they have an Al-Qaeda president.
Correct.
Apparently Trump is cool now with, and all the Saudis. I wonder why. But
so, and then also in Afghanistan, the Taliban is back in
power.
So you have to be careful what you ask for. What the answers are, I don't know. At first, you would think, oh, you know, Israel striking against Iran, it's going to be like a repeat of Israel's strike against the Osirak reactor in 1981. And the Iraqis did not retaliate. What they did was they threw a huge conference in the summer of 1981 that was attended by hundreds of their allied delegates from, quote, progressive organizations and countries, you know, communist countries, progressive and leftist organizations. And they made a lot of noise and a show of unity, but that was it. Now this is different. Now Iran is far more advanced in ballistic missile technology. Their nuclear program is far along than Iraq.
And yeah, to be fair, there haven't been that many civilian casualties in Israel, but it does seem like the Israelis have been surprised by the amount of damage they have been able to cause. I mean, yeah, they struck, the Iranians were able to strike like very close to, what was it, like the Israeli Pentagon, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they are no joke. And especially because there was also, some actually thought that the initial hit against Iran was so strong that they would struggle to coordinate a response. So if anything, they've been more effective than expected.
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians have had chemical weapons and biological weapons. Those were developed in the 1980s with the help of Western companies, as well as China and the communist bloc. I mean, the communist bloc, including China and the Russians, backed both sides in that war. But yeah, the Western companies, China, North Korea, et cetera. So they have chemical and biological weapons. I mean, that's pretty much a fact. And both sides, I will say, from afar here in the U.S., I'm glad that both sides are not using those kinds of strategic weapons against each other. Because if Israel uses a nuclear bomb, of course, and I do believe that Pakistan, which has been having a nuclear program since at least the 1970s, and certainly in the 1980s under General Zia-ul Haq, they've had an atomic bomb program. And I think they would remember Pakistan is one of Iran's eastern neighbors, and they may use it. And vice versa, if Iran uses its nuclear weapons or biological chemical weapons against Israel, Israel sure as heck will retaliate as well. So it's, I don't propose to have all the answers on what we should do. I mean, I would, out of obligation and strategic necessity, back Israel with weapons and advice. But when it comes to sending troops or committing American combat aircraft, at this point, I'm very hesitant to do that, to be honest with you. But we'll see what happens. Now, Russia is evacuating its personnel. I think they've made the strategic decision without having all the details in front of us. They've made the strategic calculation that they can't expend resources on what could be a two-front war because they're already having difficulty in Ukraine. China, from what reports have stated, public reports, they have airlifted weapons, at least a massive Airbus plane load worth of weapons into Iran. We'll see how it unfolds. As much as these Russia and China back Iran, the question is are they going to throw their weight around in that part of the world, or are they going to take a strategic calculation and stand down? I mean, the Russians are evacuating their personnel.
As occurred in Syria, because and that's really what led to Assad's downfall. His traditional allies, Iran included, just were occupied with other things, did not have the willingness to intervene, and as a result, it came down.
Although the new leadership is open in Syria, is open to Russian bases regardless. So
I'm sure
that, but I mean, the guy is reputedly ex-Al-Qaeda, and as far as I'm concerned, that can't be trusted. And it was some of the anti-interventionist folks that played that up. And to me, Assad, and from my perspective, Assad versus Al-Qaeda, pick your poison. They can't be trusted either way. But this has split MAGA profoundly. You have people like Mark Levin, who I just saw earlier, Laura Loomer on Twitter, and others.
I will say real quick, just so we don't have to debate, but just so the audience knows our differences of views. I, for instance, I supported the JCPOA. I think that it was better than the alternative. And I think when we look at the evidence, regardless of whether, they were secretly enriching or not, the progress that they presumably made towards a nuclear bomb was far less under the JCPOA than before. And now they definitely have an incentive to develop a bomb. And they should. If they had a bomb, then, Israel wouldn't attack them. And no one would they wouldn't be a threat to being invaded either. I forget what else. There's something else you said that I wanted to.
Is there something about Laura Loomer? Because she's taking
no. Before that, regarding
the interventionist side, by the way, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah. Of course.
And Mark Levin, definitely, he's very outspoken on X.
That's what I was going to say. That my solution to this conflict would be to not necessarily immediately, but threaten Israel, say, hey, you need to cut this out, or we're not going to send you any more weapons, as in my opinion should have been done years ago at this point, and as many other presidents have done for decades, which got Israel to quit its questionable behavior from my point of view, but that's no longer done.
Yeah, so I mean, somewhat differing views here, but so you have the hardcore interventionist sides, either that we should back Israel even more than even what I'm suggesting, or even send troops or aircraft in. And Mark Levin is basically a neoconservative. Laura Loomer, I was a little surprised about in some ways. Levin, not so much. And then
she's very Zionist, so that makes sense. I mean, she is supposed to be kind of diehard MAGA, but she's always been very, very pro-Israel.
And then you have you have others in that camp. And then on the other side of the issue, you have Tucker Carlson, who Trump now views as a kook, according to a latest Twitter posting, and also Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then you have, of course, the libertarian anti-interventionist Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and a lot of other Republicans that are either MAGA or libertarian. And
Dan Caldwell, who's no longer in the administration, he gave a good interview today to Sagar Enjeti and Crystal Ball, just kind of giving his read on and perspective on this conflict. Really good. I would recommend listeners check that out.
who is it? Who is it?
Dan Caldwell.
Dan Caldwell.
Yeah, he was like purged during like this whole. I haven't even kept up. It's so hard to follow some of this stuff with Hegseth and the Pentagon.
Yes.
You know, that he like purged a ton of people because he thought that there were like leaks, and now they're like subjecting everyone to polygraphs. I don't even know what you know what is what in there, but yeah, presumably like Elbridge Colby, and there are restrainers in the administration that I hope are speaking out internally. But yeah, it has created a split for sure.
And it's very public. It's all over social media. It's all over the conventional media. You know, but
yeah, wow. Like I'll open up my X and I'll just scroll and see, hey, like, yeah, this is really getting a lot of traction, and all of this I agree with. Like a lot of people coming out here saying, no, please, no war.
And for the record, I mean, I take somewhat of a more pro-Israel stance. I mean, not that you're anti-Israel, I mean, because you're not. But for the record, I just can't stand Mark Levin. I do not like him personally on the radio, his persona. And I know some people in the audience have complained about my voice as being shrill sounding or whatever. Mark Levin has a horrible radio voice in my and he's also you know, he also had a weird policy. Like he had because of the Trump administration, the first one and obviously the second one, Levin used to be a bit of a China appeaser when it came to economics, investment, and trade.
Then he flipped.
Yeah, he flipped. He knew where the wind was blowing. I remember, and I quoted in in my book, Sowing the Seeds of Our Destruction, where Levin scolded very rudely a protectionist caller, I think back in 2011 or 2012. That video is no longer available, but he scolded a protectionist caller, and he said that people of China want to trade with the people of the U.S. A country doesn't trade with a country. That people want to trade of the U.S. want to trade with the people of China. And he was paraphrasing former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the UK. I knew where he was getting that phraseology from. So yeah, and he also is very anti-union. He's very much a financialization, supply side, trickle down, neoliberal economics. So even though him and I agree on certain surface issues and certain analysis of the intentions of our adversaries, someone like Levin would basically leave the fundamentals within the nation undefended. What I mean is that he'll ignore the growing radicalization of younger people in America opposing capitalism, and rather than finding out exactly what and why these people are being radicalized, he'll just take punitive measures and just merely crack their heads or scold them, essentially, rather than doing the carrot and stick approach that I had, that if they get violent or destroy property or hurt other citizens, crack their heads, you monitor them, but then you also try the other approach simultaneously, is also undertake social reforms that will ameliorate conditions. And, you know, he likes to flex this military muscle, but at the same time, Levin is a staunch advocate of Reaganomics and an opponent of industrial policy. So basically, he's going to fight wars with imported parts, essentially. And that's really one of my many core issues of regarding Reaganomics. So that's my bone to pick with the neoconservatives, or parts of the neoconservative side. You know, people like Loomer are more interventionists economically. They're she's more akin to us. Now, there are other things that are concerning me about Trump.
Well, I think that Loomer specifically, and a lot of like the hardcore MAGA types. I mean, her and MTG have differences over Israel, evidently, or really more accurately over Iran. But I don't think that either of them really have fixed political beliefs with regards to a lot of domestic policy, frankly.
I'm going by what she has posted on X, like, for example, having training programs instead of hiring guest workers from abroad.
Sure. Yeah,
Whether she
especially
actually
on
believes it,
immigration, but yeah, I don't
whether
know.
she actually believes it or not, I don't know.
Yeah,
Personally,
no, my thing is more that I think that someone like her can kind of roll with whatever, so long as, like, let's say Trump goes with it.
correct. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, most of them, like, take another example of a huge betrayal that I think you and I would agree with, was the whole H-1B visa.
Yeah.
And Loomer even was on Steve Bannon's War Room. She was
Mhm.
going into the whole anti-tech oligarchs and Curtis Yarvin and others. But
Yeah, Bannon, for instance, at least does have like pretty concrete political beliefs. I mean, he has to adjust them to like vibe correctly with MAGA and with Trump. But he does have like a clear platform of things that he cares about and principles, and he tries his best within the framework of MAGA to be true to them.
yeah, well, I mean, the H-1B visa issue, where Trump followed the lead of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, where Trump said, "I'm for H-1B visas," which was a reversal from his first campaign.
Absolutely, yeah. In his first term, they did restrict H-1Bs a lot during his first term, and that was good. But I mean, yeah, that also goes back to the same thing. Like, Trump himself doesn't really have, in a way, it's sort of good. Like, it depends, but it's also really bad. He doesn't really have fixed, beliefs on a lot of these issues. I mean, even immigration, which is supposed to be one of his core issues, he's very all over the place. It's just kind of, the important thing for him is to appear directionally hard on immigration, but I don't know. Definitely on trade, he certainly is a protectionist, that we can say, but he's just kind of not even a feather in the wind. It's what's the joke, that he's just a sofa? It's just like the last guy that talks to him is kind of what he goes with. It's very easy to influence him, particularly if you stoke his ego. I
And if
mean,
you're a billionaire, I mean, even Peter Navarro, in one of his books that he wrote after the Trump administration, had said, and it was more critical implicitly of the Trump administration than one would think. And he said that basically that Trump absolutely trusts the billionaires, and basically for obvious reasons. And that was a huge mistake on Trump's part. And Conservative Incorporated really got to Trump. And there were some in the movement, like one of the representatives of ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, Freda Ladvin, or I forget her name. She had said that basically Trump is like a blank slate. So now we're going to push him towards this, quote, free market belief system. And
that's the other, and we've said this a lot in private. It's something I say a ton, that the contradiction is the point, both within like the Republican coalition, but especially with Trump himself, because it is paradoxical. On the one hand, they've like basically legalized a lot of financial crime. He's like pardoned drug dealers and like the worst crypto fraudsters ever.
Yeah.
And what was it? I mean, it just every day it's a new low point. Or I mean, I guess his antecedents are already so bad. It doesn't even make a difference. But Yeah, on the one hand, he is giving like the ultra rich a lot of what they want, but on the other hand, he's completely screwing them with the tariffs.
Yeah.
So it is strange. And the other thing, it's it's sad because, you know, as a demagogue, I'm an expert on Latin America. And if you look at like, not even just in Latin America, but in general, like the good demagogue, the good like authoritarian populists, what they want to do is to like shore up their support in order to enact their agenda and like stay in power or like amass more power. And Trump just doesn't care. Like he doesn't, you think like it seems like he wants to be popular, but what he does not, he doesn't actually do things in order to make himself more popular. It wouldn't actually be that hard. But for whatever reason, yeah, maybe he's just captured by whatever interests or just whatever people have his ear that sway him in a particular direction. But yeah, because he is so flexible on a lot of his beliefs, like, as a Republican, Josh Hawley's going out there saying is like, hey, if we really want to be a working class party, we need to raise the minimum wage. You know what that would do for Trump's approval rating? Be a godsend for him and the rest of his agenda, but he's not going to go along with that. Same thing, like, he floated the like raising taxes on billionaires. Yeah, a lot of MAGA would be completely for that, as would independents and many Democrats. But he's just incapable of like being a good populist.
Well, he caves in. The problem is the Conservative Incorporated has such a powerful,
Except on trade, yeah.
well-funded and persistent network that they will push him in the direction and appeal and stroke his ego, as you said, and there's proof of that. Now, in that case with the taxes, before we go into the next question I have for you, next discussion point, Grover Norquist actually called Trump and was one of the forces or individuals and groups that talked Trump out of it, basically. And Grover Norquist is a libertarian globalist. He basically represents, I mean, yes, the three of us, you, me, and Grover, are all believers in capitalism in some form or another, free enterprise and private property, and have no problem with rich people per se, but that's where it ends, basically. Now, you are really, compared to me, well networked with the National Conservative movement, with the Realignment right. You know characters like Michael Lind, you know Julius Krein, you know Sohrab Ahmari and the other writers. Compact, Sohrab is no longer with Compact, as for those of you who don't know. He's now affiliated with Unheard, which is another publication. You know all these people. I'm not going to ask you to mention names, and there are many others that you know. There's a few I know or I've tried to get in touch with. What is the general mood amongst, I don't want to call them MAGA people, but what is the mood with the, let's call them the realignment right or the quote unquote populist right? Some of these figures like Krein, I would not even term right or left. He's more like me or even you for that matter. What is the mood at all these publications and outside? You don't have to mention so-and-so said this or that. I'm on this show, we respect privacy, but, whatever you're comfortable saying, tell us what's going on in that world.
Yeah, I'd say that the so-called new right and the realignment, like, it's not actually that big of a movement per se, and actually within it I would say that there are different currents, which, yeah, like I said, we're already talking about a small movement in its totality, and in its totality I would say that this is just like a group of people that, especially like online, really the only thing that concerns them is the culture war. And this especially applies to like national conservatism. Like a lot of the people that call themselves NatCon, I've gone to some of the NatCon conferences, and all they care about is the culture war.
Yeah, I've been to a few too. I went to the one in
You
Orlando.
know, there's some panels where they'll discuss like things of substance, but what really animates them, and I guess this applies to the entirety of the Republican coalition, is a culture war. Which honestly I respect to a degree, but it, you know, you need to have more than just that. Otherwise, like, you know, there's a ceiling on your support and what you can do. The same thing applies to the Democrats. But yeah, you know, most of them on the new right or the realignment, I've taken to calling it the so-called realignment, or if anything, like, yeah, we realigned all right into something worse. Protectionism abroad, and, you know, market fundamentalism at home, just like Gilded Age republicanism. They yeah, they just, it's a lot of it's just vibes, whatever Trump says, and it's sad. There are, you know, certain people within the so-called new right and realignment, such as myself, such as like the figures that you just mentioned, that yeah, don't even necessarily identify with the right or left, as you said. That yeah, we're extremely disappointed because, and I mean, yeah, I wish I could hammer this home through to a lot more people. It's like, sure, like, you can favor one side or another, but, you know, don't you want glory? Don't you want to like actually do something beyond like just, you know, pleasing your base and like a bunch of people online? Like, yeah, how about we build something popular, you know, glorious, historic, that actually makes a difference in the country and doesn't just make most people hate you, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. It's you know, the political results of both of them electorally, it ends up being the same. You get like, you know, 40% of the vote. You never manage to breach that. You start off relatively popular, and within weeks are just as unpopular as your predecessor. I mean, at this rate, we're one thing I've said is that each president, it seems like, is going to campaign on going back to the status quo before his predecessor. So, you know, Trump ran on, I'm going to get things back to how they were before Biden in my first term. Biden ran on getting things back to how they were under Obama. The next president's probably going to campaign on getting us back to Biden. So, but it's just a continuous downhill. Like, we're going nowhere. It should be obvious.
I mean, do you see anyone either in both parties that are sincerely committed to the change that certainly I, as what I term myself, a radical civic nationalist, support, or for you for that matter, or some of your other colleagues in the realignment right or whatever you want to call it? I mean, does anybody, even in your discussions, does anybody see hope in within any figures in either major political party, or no?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of promising people with good ideas and good intentions, with very little power. As far as like political figures, like, I'm a big fan of Ro Khanna, and I think he's made like the right noises on a number of things, on like, on yeah, nationalism and like industrial policy, and, you know, like a kind of new deal or whatever. But unfortunately, even he, like, he's very, so, you know, just based on his constituency, is extremely beholden to like the toxic parts of progressivism, on immigration, on crime, on climate change. Which, it's like, you know, I say this all the time to progressives. It's like, it's not that these are invalid concerns or that your point of view doesn't have a degree of merit, but it's just the way you guys talk about these things and the results of your policies alienate the very people you claim to want to represent, which they don't, the working class voters. They're policies that appeal to the professional classes, educated professionals. So, you know, you got to just recognize reality that working class people have very different views on a lot of these things, and they, you know, they care a lot more. They care a lot less about these issues than you do, and they have a very different perspective on them. And so long as that continues to be the case, the Democrats are basically hopeless. I mean, it's especially terrible because, like, I've been very critical of, well, I was very critical of Biden's immigration policy. Basically the open border for like 3.5 years. I think that was a disaster and led to what we have now, which is just deliberate cruelty towards migrants, sending people with no criminal records to a maximum security prison for life in El Salvador. Yeah, that's horrific. But that's obviously a direct consequence of Biden's policy. So both things are bad. I think we should be able to find like a sensible middle ground. You've written some really great stuff on this, actually, recently in your Substack, Nevin.
Thank you.
That would actually appeal to most Americans, and especially working class Americans. But yeah, on the contrary, now because Trump has gone so far, and you know, under the logic that they're justified in doing these things because of Biden's previous policy, the result is that now Democrats are completely radicalized again in the other direction. So most likely, the next time a Democrat takes power, they'll just do the same thing. You just completely open the border, and then it'll lead to the same reaction. It'll be an endless cycle with no end.
Well, the problem is I think there's too much political tribalism based on party and ideology, and just you know, I think talk radio has dumbed down the discussion too as well, down to bumper sticker slogans, and I think as a result, pragmatic policy making has basically thrown out the window. Now, I agree with you about Ro Khanna. I think just
I think that Josh Shapiro is a very smart politician. And he's been very good in Pennsylvania. I like the fact that he's from Pennsylvania, not just because it's a swing state, but because, you know, it's a, you know, Rust Belt state. I think at the national level, his heart would necessarily have to be in the right place on issues such as industry and stuff like that. Yeah, who else? I mean, I guess on the Republican side, Hawley is really great, although, you know, the January 6th stuff was horrendous. Yeah, what else? On the Republican side, it's really dire. I mean, Vance and Rubio, from my perspective, have completely sold out on any of like the ostensibly positive parts of their records in the Senate, and it's all just to appease Trump. You know, even if they were to run on like a seemingly good platform in 2028, you know, the baggage from Trump, rightfully so, would and should hurt them.
Well, it's almost like I think by necessity that both parties are going to have to split into 2 or 3 parties. Rubio started out, I remember Rubio started out as a Tea Party Reaganite, and of course, you know, and then he moved. And I knew from my time in the Coalition for Prosperous America, when I engaged in 1 or 2 fly-ins almost 13, 14 years ago, 2012-ish, 2013, I was told that Rubio's office actually was split on the issue of industrial policy even back then. There was a little conflict or debate within his office. So obviously Rubio, for a long time, it's quite possible that he was considering those ideas, just like I was from a national security point of view. And I think that's what ties Rubio and I together, amongst many other issues. But I think Rubio and Vance, they have to toe the line because their career hinges on making nice and staying in the good graces of the president. So I think that's what's going on with that. The other thing is that really conservatism needs to do a divorce from Reaganism.
Yeah.
And what used to be the Buckleyite fusionism, 3-legged stool. And they need to just throw
I just don't see that happening. Like there's a part.
I don't think it's going to happen right now. It may.
Sure, on protection, on trade, I guess. Yeah, hell yeah, it's been a complete 180. But and who knows if that'll outlast Trump? Like,
I don't think it will last. I think when Trump leaves,
it's gone. Yeah, there will be a backlash.
I mean, these are people that are committed free traders. Heritage Foundation, Mark Levin, these are all free trade globalists.
What's the Heritage guy? The president of Kevin Roberts.
Kevin Roberts.
He's a convert to protectionism, but
you think he's sincere?
Yeah, I think so. But although who knows if that would last. But the other parts of Reaganism, it like you talk to Republicans, it's a core part of their identity. Government is the enemy. Cuts, cut taxes, cut government, cut spending. Like it's a religion for them, and I just don't see how they could divorce it.
Have you ever had conversations with such Republicans about these issues, and what do you find? Do you find any converted to your ideas when you present data, or no?
Well, I guess to be fair, in the younger generations, there's a small community of like intellectuals that are less beholden to the whole debt hawkery and all of that. But and sure, like you can have conversations with people and come to reasonable conclusions, but on balance, and especially with the older generations, which are really the ones that hold sway, there's nothing to do there.
Even though the older generation benefited from the positive New Deal.
Yeah, they theoretically should be able to remember what
really, and a lot of
under
people,
the old order, which was way better for them and everyone.
Yeah, and a lot of people actually during the 1980s, when you looked at polls, were actually very upset at Reagan's economic policies because the country was really hurting. And I have an upcoming
all throughout in the 90s too, all of it.
Yeah. So, do I think that's going to happen anytime soon? Not necessarily. I think there will be profound changes in this country when you have, and I hate to say it and sound like a melodramatic here, but when you have 10 cities in every corner where you have unemployment 20, 25, 30% or even more, when you can taste it, when you can smell it, when you can feel it, when you can touch it. And that's where people are going to be like, oh my God, we need a change and we need now. That's when it's basically, and I don't hope for this, you have pitchfork level of radicalism. And that's where you're going to basically.
Yeah, maybe there could be an opening, although who knows? Yeah, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, look at Argentina, like the scenario you're describing as Argentina, and they've gone in the other direction. That's just, or correction, the same direction as us, minus the protectionism. It's just, cut spending, cut government. Government is the enemy.
Yeah.
And well, in a way, yeah, sure. I guess inflation has gone down. But wages are like the worst.
Wages are not, and small businesses, from what I understand,
industry has also been devastated. And in the medium term, I'm sure it'll improve eventually, but then eventually it'll crash, as that system always does. Again.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Javier Milei, and he also has been stated, that he is totally open. Not only is he a free trade globalist, but also China, to the point where China is printing its own currency. It's kind of like Margaret Thatcher to break the coal industry.
To be fair on that, and yeah, we have slightly different views on some of this stuff. I mean, I somewhat defend dealings between various governments in Latin America with China just out of necessity. The reality is that the U.S. is just not offering them anything, and we can't reasonably expect them to, just.
Well, that's where our policy needs to change too.
Yeah, did China especially when you're a commodities exporter, like basically all the countries in Latin America. What's your principal market?
And Brazil is in the same situation,
exactly.
Even though it's very industrialized in many ways, to be fair, and so is Argentina. To me, if I were U.S. policy, I've outlined this in my essay on Substack, What is Radical Civic Nationalism? I basically believe in exporting, as long as the countries are willing to do it. You can't just dictate totally to a country's government what to do and what not to do. But I would definitely implore upon them the benefits of the American system in some form or another, especially with a country like Argentina and Brazil. Now, for those of you who don't know what the American system of economics is, that is a combination of rational protectionism like tariffs, a nationally controlled central bank, infrastructure improvements, and really fealty for high wages for labor. And we should export that model as much as possible and diplomatically through negotiations and through exchange programs with these countries, influence operations, really encourage countries along that path. With Milei and other free traders, they would rather import a good from a tyranny than produce it within their own borders through protectionist policies. That's the big thing. And when you're, in the name of free trade, outsourcing to communist China the printing of your currency, that's a problem to me. And, Milei is like Thatcher and other neoliberals. It's like, again, the worst curse is domestic statism, even in foreign trade too as well. So if that means you import it from Russia or China, even though Milei is, to his credit, staunchly opposes those systems and their foreign policies, he shoots himself in the foot, in the Western alliance in the foot, by then opening the door to economic dependency and subversion through economic dependency. And that's one of the biggest things that was a black-pilling moment for me in conservatism, so-called, is basically the rhetoric versus the reality. And when you really peel that onion, you really start to see some black spots within the onion, if you will, the rottenness, if you will. And that's just, my experience with that. And with Trump, we're starting to see that too as well. It's back and forth with the tariffs. He's going 0 to 60, 145% increases. There's a very good article that Julius Krein wrote.
Yeah, very good. The Lessons of Liberation Day. Yeah, very good article.
Excellent article. I encourage those in the audience to check it out. It really was an incompetent mess. Trump has now said, I'm going to invite 500,000 Chinese nationals into the United States. Look, I have nothing against the Chinese people or people of other countries. I mean, for God's sakes, I date a Hispanic first-generation immigrant woman who's a U.S. citizen. So it's not a xenophobia issue, clearly not. What it is a national security issue. And are they going to bring that learning and knowledge of superior U.S. technology and science back to China to further build up its military and espionage and industrial capabilities? And it's just Trump goes back and forth, and really what he does is he appeases his donors. Trump is basically a creature of big capitalism. And basically, you look at what happened with immigration, his tweet, for example, on X, saying, look, the farmers are suffering, and I'm not saying they're not. Hey, let's use that labor. Now, to me,
it's so incoherent.
It's also condoning near slave labor conditions. When you
which he doesn't care at all about. I mean,
and I do care about that. That's really, I was going to use profanity, but that's really terrible. You're basically, you have the ghost of the Confederacy lies within a good chunk of the American political elite, and who often work at the beck and call of the economic elite. So I was really disgusted with that. So Trump has betrayed us on the aspects of the China national security issue. He has betrayed us on immigration. He really does not have a particularly great trade policy, because you have to phase in these tariffs. It's like a drug patient or alcoholic.
You need to have like a domestic program to like actually revitalize industry. Otherwise, what are you doing?
You need actual industrial policy. You got to make stock buybacks illegal over a few years.
Yeah, these are all things that he doesn't care about at all in the slightest.
Well, it's not only he doesn't care about, it's like...
Or he agrees with them, Yeah,
he agrees with them, and the Republican Party doesn't want to touch that, because President Reagan legalized stock buybacks, which used to be illegal before 1982. Also having free higher education for certain majors like biology, metallurgy, engineering, trade schools like for welding and plumbing and carpentry, and other medicine, these majors which will then nurture the human capital to produce these goods again, if you will, to have this talent within this country to nurture and redevelop it and redeploy either long dormant industries or industries that currently exist, but these policies will allow it to expand. I also call for the creation of, from the Federal Reserve, to nationalize it. And I'm generally a fan of nationalization, but it's an emergency period, and create the third national bank of the United States. And that would disperse grants and loans, low interest or no interest, to entrepreneurs willing to restart domestic industrial sectors. B, as the government, the federal government will have a program in hiring, identifying, I guess through Social Security records and employment records, people who used to work in the industries that used to exist in the United States, especially the ones that are still individuals still alive and not deceased, and pay them a stipend to advise entrepreneurs on restarting these industries. I would do that. And then I would also slowly, as we reindustrialize, start to close the loopholes that used to exist since the 1950s, the Buy American legislation for government procurement. So those are some examples of things that I would do to really revitalize American manufacturing. And for those American manufacturers who have factories within the 50 states of the United States, the corporate tax rate, I would lower it to 15%. I would do selective deregulation, when needed, using the book, like, for example, Philip K. Howard's Death of Common Sense. It's a very good book. I recommend it for those of you who read it, but also make sure that industry is properly re-regulated to prevent issues like, for example, what happens in auto parts plants in the South, where people die, and this was under Trump and even before, die from companies, frankly, wanting to cut corners and sacrifice life and limbs of their workforce. So certain things I would tightly regulate and police. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're an ethical business person, you're not going to wouldn't have a problem from an administration, let's say, that I would govern, for example. In fact, we would let you in the government. We would let business people assume positions even of cabinet secretaries, but in that respect, but ethical business people or national-minded business people. So those are some things that I would do. And the thing is industrial policy, this is like an alcohol or drug addict. It takes time to get addicted to something. It also takes time to wean yourself off of these substance abuses, whether alcohol or drug.
Tax cuts, the almighty tax cut.
Well, actually, I call for targeted tax cuts, and my tax rate runs from 0.1% to 40% for people making $1 billion or over.
Well, however, sure. I mean, and people talk about this all the time, but actually simplifying the tax code, which would be much more productive. I think that the whole bracket system doesn't make any sense. You just it should just be a single bracket per income. Because the way it works, if people aren't familiar, it's that the first 30,000 are like taxed at whatever percent. Then it increases from like 30,000 to 50,000, and then the next 50,000 to 70,000, and then over 100,000, etc. It's whatever. But it's not that if you make 100,000, you're taxed in total 35%. It's that, like I said, at each level of that income, those different levels get taxed different amounts. It's insane. And it lends itself to loopholes and all this stuff. It should just be a fixed bracket for your particular income, and that's it.
And it should be a very low rate for the people who are small business people, and average people and whatnot. Because in that sense, I'm more of a believer in demand side economics rather than supply side economics. But again, I mean, corporate tax rate, if you, for example, pay very good wages to your employee, you would have to, of course, determine this. And you can do. But if you pay good wages, you have defined benefit plans.
If you manage to increase like the U.S. market share in whatever industry, then you can get relief of whatever percent or some sort of deduction. But that's communism. That's picking winners and losers. So
Well, and and I'm sorry, people who think that I don't want to sound ableist. I'm going to sound like my friend Connor, who's another streamer, but that is just retarded ideology. It is retarded, and I am sorry. It's no offense to the people who are mentally challenged, but that is really bad thinking. It is know-nothing free market fundamentalism, because picking in winners and losers, we used to do that in this country. We still do that.
It still happens. The winners, the winners are the ultra rich, and the losers are the everyman.
I mean, supply side economics do not work for national security. They do not work for shared but earned prosperity. And this big, beautiful bill, the next spending and tax plan, is a slap in the face for the MAGA voters. And it's a slap in the face for the portions of the MAGA populist wing and nationalist wing, because it's basically warmed over Reaganism. Really and truly, what the Republican Party, by and large, with certain exceptions, is basically the front office and the back office for wealthy donors. And I'm not saying the Democrats don't have their severe challenges. I mean, look, they denied Bernie Sanders the nomination twice, whether you like Bernie or not, or agree with his policies. That's something that Donna Brazile, former DNC chairwoman, and others have admitted to, pretty much. So yeah, the problem is the existential issue really comes down to is basically destroying the plutocracy. The private oligarchs can have a seat at the table. They should, in my opinion. People should have the right to lobby, in the sense to redress the grievances of government and assemble and say that, but they can't control the government through this perverted campaign finance system and the way that lobbying is permitted, where people can just do what has been called in political science for decades, the revolving door. If you're a cabinet secretary, if you're a president,
you'll go sit on the board at Boeing or at Walmart, or
you go back to your old job. You don't serve on a board or of a company, or you don't become a lobbyist. You go back to your original profession, whether it's business or medicine.
Or you lobby for foreign countries. You take money from whoever.
And until that's changed, it's going to be very difficult to advance the policies that you and I support. And that's the bottom line. So did you have any other thoughts to add? I know you and I are talking a lot and having it back and forth. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we kind of wrap up with some outros?
No, yeah, we touched on a lot. So,
Juan, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. Where can people find your writings and other works?
So you can follow me on X. It's at Rojas R1D. And also, I started a Substack. It's called Social Democracy with Populist Characteristics.
Yeah, I like that. Good articles there too. Be sure to subscribe to Juan's Substack. And could you repeat your Twitter handle again, please? Because I don't know if people
at Rojas R1D.
Okay, at Rojas
R1
D. Okay, just want to make sure. And be sure to follow Juan's articles also on Compact Magazine. In the past, he's written a number of really provocative pieces, as well as American Affairs, as well as, of course, Juan's Substack, Social Democracy with Populist Characteristics. And my Substack is Wilderness of Mirrors. Be sure to follow it. My perspective is from a radical civic nationalist position. That's a term that I've coined. There's a lot of, let's just say my work is also has a heavy load of data that's well documented, whether you agree with my points or not. Be sure to check out Juan's works. Be sure to check out my works too as well. And spread the word about this channel, as well as, again, Juan's articles on the publications that we just named. thank you all. Again, let's pray for our country. God bless America. Do good for each other. Let's pray for the citizens, average citizens in the Middle East, whether in Israel as well as Iran. I mean, I'm not going to pray for the Iranian leadership. I think you and I can agree. They're obviously they need no introduction. But let's just hope that American boots on the ground don't go. Because I am hesitant about that. I am a hawk, but I'm a very cautious hawk, as I put it to Sohrab Ahmari in a exchange that him and I had on X, which was a friendly exchange, I might add.
All I'll say on this matter that I will pray for neither the Israeli leadership nor the Iranian leadership, but I will certainly pray for the people of Israel and of Iran.
One thing that's very encouraging, even the patriotic Israeli people, and when I think it was the Israeli defense minister made, I'm sure you saw this X post where he was talking about brazenly saying, "Oh, we're going to take out Iranian citizens." I know it's the eye for the eye and whatnot, but to the credit of a lot of patriotic Israelis who have no illusions about Iran and its aggressive intentions toward Israel, they were calling out that kind of
wow, that's good to
harshness. Yeah. And, Zionism is a very mixed community. There are Zionists that I don't agree with that are, for example, Daniela Weiss, for example, and others that to me are repugnant. I'm more of a secular Zionist, if you will. I'm not going to get into Israeli policy now, but, I pray for the patriotic but sane elements within the Israeli leadership, as well as the Israeli people and the Iranian people. And I pray that the Iranian people do become free from the Islamic Republic, and hopefully that country will chart itself a more democratic path that avoids Islamic fundamentalism and it avoids neoliberalism and shock therapy. So I will close with those thoughts. A little complicated, but nevertheless, those are my off-the-cuff thoughts about what's going on in the Middle East. And that's all I have to say. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Juan, for joining us. And we definitely hope to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Nevin.
Okay. And let me just